All right, we're gonna live stream. We're gonna live stream, and let's see if anybody shows up. Today's word is juicy. I didn't feel like drawing somebody's butt or somebody just eating an apple, so I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna draw what I want. I'm gonna draw Optimus Prime, and he'll be leaking. So that's juicy. Hey, Jesus, and hello, Kiro. So nice to see some folks there. Gonna get started in just a sec. So yeah, I'm gonna draw Optimus Prime, or I'm gonna try anyway, and I'm gonna try using a brush. We'll see how this goes. Not bad. I kind of like it. It doesn't hold that much ink, and it's very small, so it's probably more for doing fine details. Hello, David Smith, and hello, Attitude Era Gaming, who says he's playing the Friday the 13th game. Well, that sounds fun. I'm working on art. So I figured the whole point of this exercise, Inktober, is to become better at inking. Only made sense to finally pull out an actual brush and work with that. We'll see how I do. Kiro quotes Optimus Prime. Ghost Dog asks what I'm drawing. It's going to be a very battle damaged Optimus Prime. Hello, Keith. So I'll probably not spend the whole time using this brush because it's very slow, or at least I am very slow with it right now. But I can already tell you I really like the control on it. If you take your time, this is not at all hard to do. This is just time consuming. And the quality of the ink is much better. It's just more it's darker, and yeah, it just goes down real smooth. I like it. That's correct, comic book guy. It's an Optimus. So I was massively into Transformers around like third grade or something. They were new. I thought that they were the coolest. They were definitely the main toy that I was into as a kid. I could not get enough of them. Some people were into G.I. Joe or He-Man at that point in time. I like G.I. Joe, but my first love was Transformers. I used to go home after school and record the episodes on VHS tapes. I had like all the episodes, but of course they weren't really in order. They were just sort of as they aired, and they had commercials, and we didn't have cable, so like if it was pretty stormy weather and the reception wasn't that great, it could look pretty pixelated. But I had all the episodes, and I would watch Transformers a lot, a lot. Hello, Shirley, and hello, Anja. Let's see. Mark Berner says third grade was the hardest 3 years of my life. Comic book guy says he liked Transformers and Voltron. Yeah, it's boy was I into it. And then I got like a paper route when I was pretty. Actually, I got two paper routes technically, and that gave me a little bit of spending money, but not much because most of it I had to put towards college. That was just the rule that my parents had, and I'm glad they did. But when I became 16, I still had that paper route, and I also got a job at Walgreens as a clerk. So I had a 20-hour-a-week job, and now everything from Walgreens went into the bank for college, but I was able to keep 100% of what I earned um, on the paper route, as well as things like mowing lawns and babysitting and odd jobs like that. So I was kind of getting out of Transformers by that age, but I finally had all this sort of spending money, so most of it was going to comic books. That's what I discovered by then, but every once in a while, some of it would still go to a Transformer. Although the overall quality had really dipped by that point. Anyway, well, I like using this brush, and I may come back to it for some fine detail, but it's it's a little slow, and so for the show, I don't think, or for the live stream, I don't think it's quite what I want to keep doing. But I'll definitely be playing around with this some more, and I may even bust it out later to do some fine detail. Kira says the 80s were awesome. Hello, Charles. Ghost Dog says, I never really got into Transformers. The theme is awesome, though. I should pick it up on DVD. Yeah, you should. Let's see. The 80s was a big year for robots of all types. It was, at least here in America. All of a sudden, the Japanese idea of giant robots sort of hit big in the 80s. We'd had a small taste of it throughout the 70s, but really became a thing in the 80s. Got Robotech, Voltron, all sorts of stuff. So anyway, yeah, I'm a huge fan of Transformers. Definitely doodled them all. Oh, I as a 10-year-old, I made a 60-page Transformers comic book. It was terrible. My goal sort of like I don't know what my goal was actually. At first, I was essentially reproducing the all ideas from episodes. I wasn't like adapting them literally, but it's very obvious that my my ideas aren't very original when you go back and read it. And then at a certain point, like, a little more than halfway in, it seems like my goal shifts to trying to include every single transformer just for like completionist's sake. Uh, yeah. But it is kind of funny to see the artwork of a 10-year-old evolve somewhat dramatically over the course of a few pages. Um, the panels that would look best would be the ones where I had the actual toys and I would like be able to directly reference them, like I could hold the toy in front of me and draw it accurately. That was those are the best pages. And then sometimes I had to just sort of I didn't own the toy, so I just sort of had to guess at what they looked like based on my memory of an episode. Those not you'd be surprised. The 10-year-old's memory not that great. Sigmig says, was there any hype prior to the first Michael Bay Transformers movie? Any expectations people had? Um, I'm not sure that there was really. I think a lot of us grew up with it, so we were just sort of hoping for the best. But I don't know that there was a ton of hype. Yeah, comic book guy mentions Shogun Warriors and Kiro watched Mazinger Z. We called it Transwar Z here. Yep. Comic book guy says the comics of Shogun Warriors were kind of meh. I can't say that I actually read them, so I didn't know that. Sorry, I think I'm sort of reminiscing a bunch right now, just sort of thinking about Transformers and the stuff that I was enjoying in the 80s. I didn't have cable and I didn't have a Nintendo, so oh, and I couldn't watch TV on school nights. That was a rule too in my household. So I would record Transformers to watch on the weekends, or sometimes my mom would let me watch like one show before I did my homework. So um, anyway, like because I didn't have access to, you know, cable TV or video games or anything, I really sort of had to create my own entertainment. There was lot of drawing. There was a good amount of playing with my toys, and there was just playing outside with the neighborhood kids. I was always so jealous of my friends that had a Nintendo. And then when I got older and started babysitting, I would get so excited for like when the kids had to go to bed because that meant that I could start playing with their Nintendo. Thought Nintendo was pretty awesome. So this is very nostalgic for me, like drawing this kid from this character from my childhood. Let's see, what are people saying? Sigmig says, "Ever hear of Voltes V?" I haven't. Mark Barner says, "Did you watch The Walking Dead? AMC advertised Kirkman's Secret History of Comics. Looks decent." Not yet. I haven't watched the new episode from last night yet, so I'll get around to it, but not yet. Too busy. And I knew about Kirkman's upcoming show. I think it's a good idea. I hope it generates some more interest in comics. We'll see. He's going to be on Seth Meyers tomorrow night, by the way. Kirkman is. Is tomorrow Tuesday? Yeah, he's going to be on Seth Meyers late night with Seth Meyers tomorrow night. Should be good. I'm happy for my old pal. More questions. I'm going to miss these live streams after it's said and done, says Ghost Dog. Well, I'm trying to give some thought to how I could sort of keep doing them to some degree, but thank you for that. We'll see. I very much appreciate being able to interact with people here, see what your interests are, and answer questions you might have. I like that quite a bit. So it's I don't know if I could do a daily one right now, but I might be able to do something more like a longer weekly one, something like that. We'll see. Giving it some thought. Mark says, "Did you play at the background and bother grumpy old men?" Oh, geez, I lost the train of the thread. I'm sorry, I don't remember what that was. Oh, hey, Gershgorsh is back. How are you? Let's see. Kiro says, "One of my favorite Transformers was Starscream, especially his voice. Very unique." Yeah. Chris Latta was the voice actor that did that, and I agree. He did a pretty incredible job. Very, very distinct. I think a big part of why I liked Transformers so much was the voice actors that they hired were all exceptional. Like whoever the casting director was for that show, like knocked it out of the park more than most. Um, just some really, really well done work there. Ah, Gershi Gorsh says that I'll find something nicer for my next job. Thank you. Appreciate that. Um, yeah. it's a tough time right now, but yeah. And Mark says that I'm always griping about the noisy kids outside, and he finds it funny. Yeah. Right now, I can actually see the playground. There does not seem to be anybody there. The sun is starting to go down. Uh, it's actually kind of warm today, so I'm a little surprised that those little rugrats aren't running around causing chaos tonight, but they're not, so I won't look a gift horse in the mouth. JQYT joins us and he says, "I can say I already like this drawing." Well, cool. We'll hope for the best. We'll hope this thing can look good once it's inked, and that I spot the shadows correctly, etc. We'll see. Okay, so one thing I've learned in my relatively short time inking regularly is, I was saying like, oh, this brush is dying on me, this brush is dying on me. Well, that's not exactly the case. What happens is if you draw too fast, it just the ink doesn't come out fast enough. So it's sort of like it looks like it's dying, but no, like all that's really happening is you need to slow down. There's an actual speed at which you can use these tools. So the trick becomes figuring out the right tool for like the right area so that you can kind of keep moving at a good pace. Like filling in this black area here, I should probably have, and I don't, but I should probably have a thicker, bigger brush for this. Instead, I'm using like a fine brush, so I have to go extra slow. But if I'm impatient and I wanted to fill this in faster, I should just have a thicker brush. So it's all about slowly accumulating the right tools so that you can produce what you're trying to. It's interesting learning this stuff that you can really only pick up with experience. Questions? JQ says, "I'm sorry if I annoyed you last time with all the donate stuff." Oh, I didn't mind the sentiment at all. It was just that if people were going to donate, they would have. I just didn't want to bore anybody, but I appreciate the thought, so don't worry about it. It's all good. Gersha Gorsh says, "More Sleepy Hollow now, Scotland type." Ghost Dog says, "Do you think school hinders or helps creativity in young children? Would you recommend going to art school?" It all depends on the teacher. The system can foster creativity just fine. It just matters who that person's teacher is, and if they can really address that kid's needs. I hope that makes sense. As far as like, should you go to art school? I think if somebody wants to be an artist, the answer is they should plan on that. But if they think that they're at a point where they don't need it anymore, move on, go pro. But be careful. You do it too soon and you're not disciplined, that's not good. I think that that's one of the main things that you can learn at an art school or really any school is just discipline to get your work done. I think that that's an important thing that a school can teach you, especially higher education. Optimus Prime is sort of a trickier character to cover because he doesn't have a very expressive face. There's not a lot of detail there. So if you want to make somebody like Optimus Prime expressive, you have to really like rely on things like his hands and overall body posture. It's tricky. Let's see. Mark says that he likes the Beatles song Day Tripper. Me too. Mike L. joins us. He says, some art teachers just want you to emulate what they like, and I find that stifling. Yeah, definitely agree. It's all about a good teacher. So that's tricky. TARDIS Rider joins us and says, I was never into Transformers, but I have fond memories of Micronauts. That's cool. I feel like Micronauts were like a hair ahead of my time, if that makes sense. Never mind, I was saying earlier that I didn't hear annoying kids. I hear them now. When it gets colder, I'm just going to throw like water balloons at them out this window or something. Not really going to do that, but I want to. I want to just shut those kids up. Ugh. Shut up! Shut up! Just watched all your Godzilla Mendoza collabs. Funny, dude. Yeah. Mark Barner says that his favorite Micronaut was Bug. Well, Transformers. Marvel still has the rights to Bug. They created him, I guess, independent. Even though he was created during the Micronauts comic book, apparently that was an original creation. So Bug actually shows up in a lot of the Guardians of the Galaxy comics. And James Gunn has said that he's tried to include him, but that the rights are a little too convoluted right now for that. So I guess Hasbro must own some measure of rights to that character. But apparently Marvel's able to do whatever they want with him in the comics. So that's cool. To me, it sounds like the kids outside are just absolutely screaming. But can you guys hear them? I might be making something out of what to everybody else is nothing. TARDIS Rider loves Bug. So Mark's got a fellow fan there. TARDIS Rider says, I think I was a bit too old for Transformers, but appreciated Ditko in Micronauts books. That's fair. That makes sense. And I think it was just like, I think I sort of discovered comics a little later than some. I'm trying to think, but I was like probably something like 12 or 13 when I really discovered comics. And I do think that some kids discover that earlier. around here. I know I've got candy somewhere. Aha! I knew it. JQ asks, what's my favorite MCU movie? Winter Soldier, Captain America Winter Soldier. Yeah, I think that's my personal favorite, but there's a lot of other ones that are certainly close. I mean, that first Guardians of the Galaxy movie is pretty fantastic too. That'll be close second, I guess. Kiro says, not as popular, but Rom's Space Knight was a pretty cool comic from the 80s. I agree. That was a really good comic. Really out there ideas. It's kind of amazing that like Marvel was producing things based on Micronauts and Rom that were so good. I totally get why they tried to do Transformers, but ultimately they didn't do a great job at that. And I think some of it might be because there were so many more toys that they basically had to push in it. Micronauts and ROM both had a lot less merchandise to push, so that like let the writers and artists invent a lot of stuff to fill that in. Transformers was just kind of constantly pushing new stuff. It didn't give a lot of room to explore ongoing stories when every several issues you have to introduce a bunch of new characters. It makes it also harder to care about your favorites because they tended not to be in the book for that long. Mark Berner says that it sounds like the kids in the background in the playground are screaming F me. So, yep, possible. Possible. Nobody likes me. They all scream, kill Skunk Ape. Oh well. So I'm basing this super beaten up version of Optimus Prime off of an actual episode of the cartoon to a degree. They they killed Optimus Prime off in their animated movie in '86, and the show lost a big step at that point. It just it was kind of a bummer not having some of your favorite characters around. So anyway, they figured it out really late into the next season's run that they were like, oh shoot, like people loved this character, we got to bring him back, and they did. They had a story where he was brought back, but mind controlled basically, and he gets really blown up, and he gets an arm ripped off, and his face is all scarred up. Anyway, TARDIS Rider says that he remembers Rom. Was there ever a Stretch Armstrong comic? I don't think there was. There easily could have been. I mean, that was a long-running toy, so there could have been. But if there was, it certainly wasn't a long-running comic. Huh. Interesting. Interesting question. I don't think that there was a Stretch Armstrong comic. I think that there was briefly a cartoon. Pretty sure there was a cartoon about him. Did not watch it, so couldn't tell you too much. What was your guilty pleasure cartoon growing up? One that you were like, I'm not a huge fan, but I'll watch it. For me, it was Silverhawks. I thought that show was fun. It wasn't that good. It was kind of just trying to do the same stuff that Thundercats had done, but anyway, that was my sort of guilty pleasure cartoon as a kid. Curious what else out there people would call a guilty pleasure cartoon. Keith says that I appreciate you continuing with this show regardless of a really bad month. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. And Ghost Dog seconds that. Well, I appreciate that. Don't have much more to add than that. Hasn't been great. That's okay. But every month is great. Gershigorsh says that Jason and the Wheeled Warriors could be one. I agree. Wheeled Warriors, quick changing fighting machines. I remember. Oh, what a like shameless ripoff of Star Wars. I mean, they had Han Solo and a C-3PO. Merlin was clearly Obi-Wan Kenobi. I mean, I know his name wasn't Merlin, but I'm just saying, wow. Like, wasn't it? I think now that I'm thinking of it, I think his name was Jace. Just not Jason, but just Jace. Uh, it was definitely cribbing everything from Star Wars, like shamelessly, but it was fun. Except, of course, for the fact that in Star Wars, he didn't fight plant monsters. Saw Boss, I think, was the name of that guy. Does anyone remember the Transformers episode where they had to turn Spike into a robot to save his life but went crazy? Yeah, I remember that. Wheeljack had a lot of bad ideas on that show. I love that. Yeah, that was a weird episode. He couldn't deal with being a robot. I think it might have been called Robot X, and it was clearly just like a mashup of other Transformers body parts. It was Frankenstein. I mean, they were telling the Frankenstein story. Yeah. I remember it. I probably remember them all. Take a look at the chat in just a sec. All right, what else? Shirley says, Sadie says, nice work. Aw, good old Sadie. Jace felt very French. Maybe he was. Maybe he was. The worst Transformers episode was the supposedly Unicron origin story. That was a weird one. I remember what you're talking about, where just some alien had was thousands and thousands of years old, and first he tried making like an energy being, and then he made Unicron. That was a weird episode. Was that Call of the Primitives? But there are worse ones. There's two worse ones. Hold on. I'm trying to remember the titles. There's one set after the movie on an alien planet where they have singing powers, and it's called something like Harmony in Key F or Cacophony in Key D, something weird like that. And it has so many animation errors. Just the most animation errors I've ever seen in any cartoon. Things where, like, okay, you know how sometimes Transformers are made up of 5 robots? They'll have like the merged version of them standing side by side with one of them, and they're like equal height, and they're both shooting at the Decepticons. Or there'll be an Autobot on the Decepticon's side in a shootout. There's a scene where Galvatron and Soundwave go flying, and they hold hands. It's weird. Anyway, it's a crazy episode. It's really, really good. Julio says, what about Thundercats and Silverhawks? I think that those count. Mike L says, I'm probably alone here, but it's probably my age, but Beast Wars was my jam. Yeah, I was a little too old, so I'm not as familiar with Beast Wars. I watched the original 80s Transformers, so I don't really know the history or storyline too well with Beast Wars, other than I guess like the characters are maybe from the future, but they get sent into the past, something like that. As an adult, I've been reminiscing more about GI Joe, which was another one that I was pretty into, and there's a show on YouTube that I really like, uh, Hooded Cobra Commander 788. And on that show, he just reviews the vehicles and um, action figures from the original G.I. Joe. Well, not original, but the 80s and 90s G.I. Joe run. And I think it's really informative and funny. Um, I like it a lot. That's one of my favorite YouTube channels these days for some reason. I don't know, I'm getting into the nostalgia of it all, but it's also like really clear, easy to understand review. And it's always a little different because there's always like maybe either a joke or sometimes a sketch or something like that. I really like it. Hooded Cobra Commander 788. Gets my Chris recommend of the week. What else are people saying? Gersha Gorsh says he recently resaw the Brave Star the movie. And he says that it's a goofy cartoon. Um, I remember the commercials for it, but that's not one I watched. Did Brave Star have like a talking horse in it, or am I thinking of just a similar show? It's hard to remember. Sigamig says, "Hey Chris, watch any recent cartoons?" Um, I mean, if you're talking kids cartoons, probably not. Let me think. Um, Rick and Morty. That's a cartoon. I watch that. What else is a cartoon that I watch? I don't know. I mean, if they have episodes, Venture Brothers. That one comes out pretty infrequently. Um, hmm. Oh, I'll watch Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles every once in a while. Is that one still coming out with new episodes? Might not be at this point. I'm talking about the CG animated one on Nickelodeon. I like it. I think it's one of the best versions of Michelangelo ever. He's really likable and funny in that instead of annoying to me. That's about it. Oh, Netflix Voltron, Mike L points out. Yes, I watched that. And that is good. I like the Voltron show. Uh, let's see. Sigmig says, I was thinking Gravity Falls, Steven Universe, the kids' cartoons really popular with older audiences. I mean, I'm aware of all of those that you just listed. Haven't really watched much of any of those. What have I seen? There's one Chrissy likes called Clarence. I've seen some Adventure Time. That's pretty good. Not pretty good. It's very good. It's quite an interesting show. It's very ambitious. So if those count. TMNT now has Usagi on the show. Oh, that's cool. Keith Thomas asks, did Brave Star have horses named 3030? And I don't know, but maybe Gersigorsh remembers. There's a cool theory that's all but confirmed that Gravity Falls is connected to Rick and Morty. Yeah, well, that's because the creators, Alex Hirsch and Justin Roiland, are really good friends. And if you go back and listen to Justin Roiland's old podcast, uh, Grandma's Virginity podcast, I'm pretty sure Alex was on an episode and they talked about how they would do that. They created all these links. They never got around to doing an actual episode that would feature them together, but it was absolutely intended that they would like have several links between the two shows. Um, I know that from the podcast. And if you go back and listen to the Grandma's Virginity podcast, uh, every once in a while I get a mention because I used to do a bunch of art for the show and sometimes ask questions. So that was fun. That was what Justin and Ryan Ridley was a co-host on that. We're developing that Rick and Morty while they did that podcast. My my niece was a big fan of Gravity Falls, so I'm aware of the characters and ideas, but I haven't actually seen any of the episodes. Excuse me. Ghost Dog says he's got to exit early. All right. Well, thanks for stopping by. Let's see. I missed a few things. TARDIS Rider says, we always talk about comic books and cartoons, but is anybody else a fan of historic... Oops, I missed that. Historic comic strips. I'm a big fan of Milton Caniff, Roy Crane, Chester Gould, E.C. Seeger, etc. I've always wanted to know more about that stuff than I do. I don't feel that I'm tremendously knowledgeable about the best comic strips out there, other than just sort of the overall history, maybe. It is something I'm thinking of addressing in some comic tropes episodes. The history of some of those early comic strips, because that is where comics really came from. So it's pretty important if you're talking at all about comics history to address some of those early comic strips. Chester Gould did Dick Tracy, said comic book guy. Okay, that's one of the ones I know a tiny bit about. So, yeah. Julio said, I saw the Junji Ito episode. There is an Argentinian artist, Salvador Sands, that has very similar style. Really creepy stuff. I'm not familiar with Salvador Sands, but appreciate you mentioning it. I'll try to remember that and take a look. Mike L. says, I started reading Green Lantern from the start in Showcase. Have you read a lot of that stuff, Silver Age GL? Not a lot. Not a lot, to answer your question. A little bit here and there. Just sort of piecemeal. Pretty weird stuff. Lots of goofy aliens. But no, I haven't. I mean, I've read some. I just haven't read all of it. Do you remember the Transformers toys where the humans on the outside but robots inside? I keep calling them flesh bags. Yeah, those were the Pretenders. Those were the Pretenders, and they were the big characters in season 5 of the Transformers cartoon that was made out over in Japan. Maybe not everybody knows this, but there were 3 full seasons of Transformers here in the U.S., and then it actually continued in Japan for another 3 seasons. Same continuity and stuff. It's not tight continuity, but yeah. So, and I'm thinking I may like review them sometime for like the show, like do another sort of series where I just do nothing but recap and discuss those Japanese Transformers episodes, because they're pretty bonkers. They're really crazy. So I don't know. I don't know if anybody would want that, but I would have fun doing it. So it's something I think about every once in a while. Chrissy says, sorry I'm late. Is that Optimus Prime? Yes, it is. What about Headmasters? Those were weird. Headmasters were the main characters in season 4 of Transformers. And wow, did they do some weird stuff in that cartoon. Like, they all hold hands and they create magic rainbows. Galvatron survives standing on Cybertron as it gets blown up, but is later defeated when he's put under a little bit of ice in Antarctica. So it's a pretty weird show, and I would really love doing episodes about how crazy each episode is. Like, I could literally talk for like 15 minutes about every episode. But I don't know if anybody cares. Probably not. Mike L says, I've been on an Adam Warlock kick. I did the same thing about 10 years ago. He's one of my favorites. Yeah. Adam Warlock is some pretty interesting, trippy stuff. Like, definitely some of Jim Starlin's most interesting work. He really had a passion for that character. And I think it shows. He really changed who he was and made him a messiah type of figure. Messianic? Would that be the word? I think so. There's still kids playing outside, and the sun has now gone down. It is dark out there, and I hear kids yelling outside. What is with these kids? Mike L says, if you could recommend a monthly comic from the very start, what would it be? I mean, any comic? I don't know, maybe Why the Last Man? That's a really good one. That's a pretty fantastic one. Let's see. Okay, goodbye, TARDIS Rider. Thank you so much for stopping by. Let's see. Keith Thomas says, anyone know of Fred Van Lente's comic book history of comics? You know, I've heard of that, but I haven't read it. Is it good? You recommend it? Keith says that he does recommend it. All right. I will keep that in mind. Thank you. Always appreciate somebody's recommendation. The Comic Book History of Comics by Fred Van Lente. Awesome. What is the hardest song to get out of your head once it's in there? Go. Gersagorsh says he can cameo in Marvel movies. Okay. Eric Rivera joins us and says, Hello, Chris. Nice Transformer. Also, what do you consider to be some of Bernie Wrightson's best work or line work artwork? Um, his adaptation of Frankenstein is probably his best overall artwork, I think. It's pretty spectacular stuff. It's yeah. So that's my recommendation. Look for that. Cool question. Michael says that a song that gets stuck in your head is, because I asked about that, is "Young Girl, Get Out of My Mind." And yeah, now that's stuck in my head. Probably the most perverted song to ever become a hit song. Young girl, get out of my mind. My love for you is way out of line. Better run, girl. You're much too young, girl. And I just sort of imagine him smiling, like, you're much too young, girl. Ugh, what a creep. Kiro says, I started reading Galacticon from Albatross Press, the American Gods comic from Dark Horse. Oh, cool. Mark Berner says that the most catchy song is SpongeBob's Musical Doodle. Is that his intro song? That's the only sort of SpongeBob song I've heard. Better run, girl. You're much too young, girl. Creepy Creature, is that a song? Hmm. Mark says that the SpongeBob's Musical Doodle was an international earworm song. Hmm. That's interesting. I gotta switch pens. One sec. What else do I have? Candy. Oh, remember how excited you would get for candy as a child? I used to get so excited for getting some candy. Wish I could have kept that kind of excitement for anything else ever. Candy. People are talking about SpongeBob, and I can't follow along. I have not seen the episode. Are they still making new episodes of SpongeBob? I think that they are. Boy, that show is long-lived. Eric Rivera says, did you hear that Mike Ploog's finally retiring? Probably one of the most underrated and important artists in the world of film and comics. You should make a video for him sometime. Give it some thought. Pretty sure that Mike Ploog did some early issues of Ghost Rider that I liked when I was younger. I have to think about that one, but I'm pretty sure. Interesting idea, Mike Ploog. Yeah, definitely an underrated creator. Probably not a lot of people these days that know about him. Worth considering. Thanks. Guess this is the time when things start quieting down. No more questions? No more comments? What was the word for today anyway? Sigmund says juicy. Yeah, it was juicy, and I don't know. It didn't really inspire me, but I am throwing some liquid spitting out of Optimus's side here, so maybe that counts. I don't know. Julio says, I'm watching in my cell phone so I can fully appreciate the art. Please post it later on Facebook or Twitter. Yeah, I usually post it on the Comic Tropes Facebook page. If I'm happy with it, I post it on my personal Twitter account, which is up there. Um, let's see. Kiro says, how do you decide where the shadows go? Well, I'm basically pretending that the light source is coming sort of top left. So a lot of the underside of things and the his right side are getting covered in shadows. I'm also putting into shadow. I'm going to be putting in like some areas where there are going to be sparks coming off because they're going to be throwing some harsh light down below. So. I mean, I don't know if it's perfect. It's what I'm doing. Yeah. Well, Shirley's taken off. Well, thank you very much for stopping by, and thanks for bringing our mail over today. You're a hero. Sigamig says, recommend any documentaries? American Movie. If you've never seen that, that is hilarious and interesting. American Movie is one of my favorites. Uh, Mike L says there's an amazing doc called What We Do in the Shadows. That is a movie by Taika Waititi, the guy that's directing Thor Ragnarok. Very, very funny movie. That's not a documentary, it's a fake documentary. Um, it would be super obvious as soon as you started watching it. What else? What are some great documentaries? I watch documentaries all the time. I'm trying to think of ones that have stuck with me. I mean, for documentary TV shows like The Jinx from HBO, that was pretty heavy stuff, but worth watching. Um, the Bridge is an interesting look at suicide and its effect on the people that are left behind after somebody kills themselves. Uh, it's good. What else is really good? I have to think about that. What are some great documentaries? There's one on Hulu right now about Bill Finger, who was not really given his due during his lifetime on how much he did to create stuff, elements, important elements about Batman. I think it would be fair to easily call him at least co-creator, and he really had all the credit taken from him by Bob Kane. But you'll see if you watch that documentary that he actually created pretty much all the key components that make Batman Batman. So it's pretty interesting if you're into comics. Let's see. I recommend Tower. It's done all in rotoscope. Is that the movie about Tower Records, or is that something else, Sigamigs? Sounds interesting. I'm not sure if I've seen it. Tower. But I'm always looking for a good documentary. Can be some of my favorite style of movie, no question. There was one on Netflix about the history of the comic book industry. I only saw half of the first episode before it was removed, and I've never been able to find it. I was super interested. I'm not sure what that is, Michael. Interesting. Oh, Sigmig's, yes, Tower about the University of Texas sniper attack. Right, yeah, they reenacted it and then rotoscoped it all because there was no actual like footage. Yeah, yeah, Tower. Excuse me. Good documentary. Do you recommend? Oh no, do you remember? Julio says, "Do you remember any comics by Top Cow? The first stories in the darkness were kind of cool." You know what? I love Mark Silvestri's art, but I never really was too interested in his characters like Witchblade or the Darkness for whatever reason. So no, that's sort of a little bit of a blind spot, I think, in my comic book knowledge. I just didn't catch my interest, at least when it was new. So haven't really read any of that. Only sort of aware of the basic idea for each character. Oh wait, he did something else too. What did he do? He did what was it called? He did a superhero book with it's been so long I can't remember what the title of Mark Silvestri's superhero book was at his own company and Image. The one with Razor Claw. What am I thinking of? Wow. Don't know. Not coming to me. I keep thinking of Wildcats, and it's not Wildcats. He did his own thing that was kind of similar, actually, but anyway. Oh, wow. It's been going over an hour, and I really still have quite a bit left to make this guy complete. Hmm. Probably not going to be able to finish it. Sigmig says, "Are you talking about Witchblade?" I'm not. He did a team book. Mark Silvestri did, but it's not coming to me what that was. Just can't remember. I think there was a question in there. Oh, Cyberforce. Thank you, Julio. Yep, Cyberforce. That's what I'm trying to think of. Hero says, "What do you think about Mark Millar stuff?" I mean, I think I've addressed this a little bit in some of my videos, like Old Man Logan. Um, I've read a fair amount of Mark Millar stuff, but I tend to find it pretty mean spirited and not always like fair. Like that characters exist in a pretty crummy world where the rules just screw them over and they don't really even have a chance to improve things. Um, I don't know. I, I think he's really good at coming up with big plots, but I think he relies on his tropes a lot too. For instance, like why do Nazis appear so often in his stories? That's weird. That's strange that they appear so frequently. Um, I don't know. He not a massive fan. Mike L says there was a comic I used to read as a kid, Bloodshot. I only had a few issues I picked up from a garage sale. Should I pursue reading it, do you think? If you're talking about the Bloodshot that Valiant Comics did in the 90s, I don't think it was their strongest. But if you're talking about but if you're curious about the character, I should say, um, the current version that Valiant is putting out is apparently much, much better. I believe Jeff Lemire wrote an arc on it that got a lot of acclaim. Um, I keep sort of meaning to read it. There's a lot of Valiant stuff I keep meaning to read. Uh, whoops. I liked it, but the issues were scattered. I only have fragments of memories of it at this point. The Valiant line in the 90s was a cool experiment with inconsistent results. There are some really cool storylines and ideas that get explored, but sometimes they just get dropped because they got popular pretty fast, and I think they started reacting to that popularity by planning like crossovers and stuff, and it interrupted the flow of a lot of these interesting stories. Uh, yeah, kind of unfortunate. So it didn't really last all that long, all things considered. If you're curious, I think that like the earliest stuff that Valiant put out in the 90s is good, but it doesn't all have an extended long good run. But yeah, Harbinger, Archer and Armstrong, uh, Magnus Robot Fighter, Solar, um, those were all pretty good. Not everything they did was good. I didn't think Ninjak was good. I didn't think Shadow Man was good. But your mileage may vary. A lot of these characters are back now. Not all of them, because some of them were licensed characters from Gold Key. Yeah, I don't remember Bloodshot being especially strong. But This is just one person's opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. Kiro says that his favorite was Eternal Warrior. Yeah, Eternal Warrior was pretty interesting. I had number one. Wonder if that's worth anything today. Probably not. Probably not. They produced a pretty good amount, and the overall level of interest these days is probably on the small side. So I wouldn't get your hopes up on that. That's all. He also said that he read Darkhawk back in the day. Yeah, I kind of like Darkhawk. Not not that original or anything. I mean, he basically just has an alien suit of armor, except it isn't necessarily that advanced. It's mostly just wings and a laser blast. That's about it. But I kind of like it anyway. I don't know. It didn't try to be more than it was really, so I was like, all right, another new teen superhero. Works for me. Chris, do you think you'll ever do a Comic Tropes episode about the Transformers comic you wrote when you were a second grader? No. It's so bad. It's so dumb. It I I do enjoy sharing it every once in a while, but boy, uh, a comic made by a 10-year-old without any help is generally not going to be very good, and my work is certainly no exception. There are some great second grader tropes. Yeah, I think fourth grader. I think I was fourth grade when I made that. Kira says, I think the problem with Valiant in the 90s was Jim Shooter wanted to write all the issues. It probably was too ambitious, and he probably exerted a little too much control. He had some good ideas, but yeah, it was too much. Mike says, when I was in 6th grade, I wrote a series of one-page comics about M&Ms and Skittles. They did not like each other. It got pretty bad. Well, that sounds more original than my Transformers comic, so I think that sounds cool. What about anybody else out there? Did anybody else make some comic books when they were kids? I also was making comic books about like what Garfield and Pac-Man when I was a kid. Oh, it's so derivative, so derivative. Well, what can you do? You're a kid. All right, Kiro. Thanks for stopping by. Hope you guys get power back soon, consistently. Good luck. Sigamig says that he made a comic called Sonichu. Maybe you've heard of it. I have not. Should I have heard of Sonichu? Gotta admit that I haven't. What was it about? Chrissy says, I made a lot of animated flip books. I wrote a book called Michael Jackson's Guide to Plastic Surgery, filled with collages of Frankenstein faces cut out of magazines when I was 9. That sounds awesome. I would actually love to read something like that. That sounds pretty original, especially for a little kid. And Segamig says that he was joking. He was tricking me with a joke. And I fell for it. Because I'm a little stinker. Mark says, a friend and I did Joe and Schmo, ambulance drivers whose motto was, "We dump the dead." That's funny. I like that. Gersegor says, I've done one called Yox about a guy with cosmic energy-based powers. That's pretty cool. Wow. Some very creative people here. Well, I might be okay with not quite finishing this one. I feel like I've worked on it for a while, but maybe not one of my best. I don't know. It's okay. Oh, wow. Gersker says that his comic won a prize at a comics publisher in Poland. That's really awesome. I love hearing it. Wow. Dr. Towley says, is Bristol the best paper for inkworks, or does it not matter as long as the paper is thick enough? Your mileage will vary both depending on the ink that you're using as well as the paper. But if you're trying to, use these inking pens or a brush on like typing paper, computer paper, it's probably going to smear a lot. It's probably not going to hold very well. So I wouldn't really recommend that. That's my only real advice. I like Bristol. I like Bristol with a little bit of smoothness, not too much roughness, but it's gonna depend on what particular tools you're using uh, to give you the best result possible. Everybody's a little different there. Yeah, good luck, Dr. Towley. Michael says, I've been drawing all my life and I never got into inking, unfortunately. Well, I mean, you don't know, nobody has to ink. You can find a talented inker that will work with you potentially, or figure out how to draw digitally. But I think for making comics, it is a key component. I've seen pencils, uh, really tight pencils that people try to darken digitally, and I just don't feel like it quite works. Maybe there are artists out there that would disagree with me, but I really haven't seen digitally darkened pencils work quite right. Not compared to what a good inker can accomplish. I know nobody wants to have their work ruined and by a bad inker, and honestly, there are a lot less inkers these days than there used to be, so that's also an issue. But um, I still think that overall they'll make the artwork look the best. No, this thing's had it. That's better. Not great. Wow, almost up to 2 hours. I should probably end it soon. People don't tend to like the longer episodes. Or do they? Maybe I don't. Maybe that's not true. I guess I said that without thinking it through. I haven't really looked at any analytics. I don't think people in general are watching the archived versions of these pieces. I, I'm sure it doesn't show up here, but I had done a little bit of inking with my brush in India ink earlier, and then I went over it with my Pigma brush pen because it's a little faster, and I can still see the original black from the brush pen in there, like underneath it. It's darker. It's a it's a more true black. Kind of interesting. It's pretty much what I would expect. It's just kind of cool to see it confirmed. What are the advantages of brush versus a brush pen? Well, uh, it's a little faster to work with a brush pen. The ink is already in there. It's going to flow down. That's that. You don't have to sort of keep dipping your quill or your brush. But the brush, you actually do have more control, uh, both with the line thickness and just sort of overall, well, yeah, I mean, I think the line thickness kind of says it all now that I think of it. I mean, it gives you the line that you want, without any real stress about how hard it's going down. Um, the blackness is deeper, but you know, it's very time consuming to go back and forth to your inkwell. A lot of people don't really enjoy doing that. So it's a little bit of matter of patience, but I think that the result you get with the brush, I can already tell it's better. So it makes sense to get used to a brush. And then the trick is just having a bunch of brushes. And, you know, instead of dipping it into this, which I can't really see into, I should pour some into like a little cup so that I can quickly just sort of like dip, draw, 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 dip, da, 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 da. Instead, I'm like sort of dipping this in, going, oh, did I dip it far enough? Can I see in there? Though it's lots of shadows. So it's just getting the proper tools and the proper work set up, and then you can work pretty fast. I feel like that's the thing I've noticed the most in comics is the more you plan ahead, the better payoff you're going to get. As in, you know, do thumbnails and stuff. You're gonna you know what you're actually trying to draw. Look at reference so that you're drawing a real car, gun, building, you know, mountain. You're going to get a better result. So it's all about sort of properly planning. Prep your workstation. Have the tools that you need, all of them, so that you don't have to take a shortcut. Like I'm sort of dealing with shortcuts because I don't have every type, every thickness of brush. I don't have like a perfect setup. I'm not a working professional, so I don't have all the tools. But the more tools that you have that you know you like to use, the more you plan ahead, the faster everything's going to be once you actually start the work. You're not going to break your rhythm thinking about like what to do next or think about what you need. If you can get into the rhythm, you're just going to lose track of time. Like I have most nights on this channel. I'm like, oh, it's already been an hour. Sigamig says, is it like painting? Not really in my experience. Painting I mean, it's a brush, so maybe your muscle control of it can transfer if you have done a bunch of painting. But in painting, you're thinking about color, you're thinking about what contrasts and complements, you're blending, you're doing all sorts of things with the brush that you really don't do when you're inking. When you're inking, you're trying to just spot shadow. You're thinking of the line weight for what's close and what's far, what's got to have fine detail versus nice thick detail. So yeah, I would say it's a pretty different skill set. Software Agents Corp says that he's back, looking like Optimus is about to make a desperate comeback. Yeah, he's seen better days. He's a little battle worn in this one. I'm pretty close to reaching an okay end point, I think. I'm not going to finish the legs, but I'm just going to try to finish this fist, this hand gripping the gun. If I can finish that, I'll sort of feel like I'm at an okay stopping point for today's sketch. So, if you've got any questions, hit me with them now, because probably going to take off in just a little bit. As always, I appreciate everybody dropping by, keeping me motivated, asking interesting questions. Gertzegorsch says, more nostalgia towards 1984 movie. Are you talking about Transformers? Because I'm pretty sure that was 1986, so maybe you're talking about something else. Let's see. He says that he's more like Night Sabers and Guyver type of mecha. I like Guyver. Well, maybe I like the idea of Guyver more than I like the actual execution. Let me think about that one. And I may need to get myself some new pens, because I didn't think I was going that fast, and kind of dying on me. You really shouldn't have to ink with a liner like this, but I'm so close to wrapping up, I'm just using what's available. Ooh, bunch of stuff here. Gershagor says Tekkaman was nice, and that maybe he has wrong with the year for talking about Transformers. That's okay. Who cares? Who cares? I think I knew what you meant. It's really exciting to hear that you won an award in Poland for your comic. That's really cool. I don't know if I've won an award for anything ever. I don't know. All right, let's see. Oh, Sigamigs asks, when you were in New Orleans, did you experience any hurricanes? Once, yeah. Once there was one in, trying to think, like, maybe May of 1990, excuse me, May of 1995. It was a pretty big one, and there was a lot of flooding, and I lost everything I owned at the time. But, not as bad as something like Katrina that came later, Maria right now, but it was enough. It was enough to make things a mess for me. It's pretty intense. There's a lot of cities that are in bad shape with the rising ocean levels and warmer waters making for more intense hurricanes and stuff. So a lot of low-lying cities and coastal cities, they're in a lot of trouble in the future. So, something to think about. I don't know what the solution is. Wow, Sigamig says that he's experienced Irene and Harvey. I'm sorry to hear that. That's some pretty intense stuff. Wow. Pierce Gorge says that his award was nothing huge, but still, I think it's huge. I think it's awesome. I think it's really cool. All right. I'm going to allow myself to let this one go and call it done. Thanks very much, everybody, for being with me on today's journey. Appreciate it. Whether you stop by or whether you're watching it later in the archive version. Thank you again to all the people that have joined my Patreon over the past month. I've gotten several more supporters there. I appreciate it. A few of you have sent me super chats when this is live. I'm very grateful for that. I'll put it all towards the show, and you guys are fantastic. It's a lot of fun to go on this journey and not feel like I'm alone. Feeling like I'm making some progress in some areas of inking. Still need to address a few others, but that's okay. I'm enjoying what I'm learning. In fact, I'm looking at this now, and I've kind of given myself a no halo rule. There can be highlights, but no halos. So this area was a halo, and I think that those are cheap. I'm going to get rid of it, and let's see how it looks. It looks fine. Looks fine. It never needed that halo. All right. Folks, thank you all. All right. Attitude Era says that he was playing Friday the 13th, and his buds ditched him with the car. Wow. All right. Thank you, Gersh. Gersh, I will keep it up. It's all thanks to you guys that it's worthwhile. But trying to get better. Few more. Let's see. How far in are we? We're on the 23rd. So not too many more. Not too many more days of this. I'm 2/3 of the way through. All right. I feel good. I feel good. Thank you all. And hey. Have I told you to keep reading comics? Because you really should. Keep reading those comics. Bye, all.